started this series in Exodus. So turn to Revelation. No, I'm just kidding. Turn to Exodus. Exodus chapter 1. So last time we talked about this big kind of overview of Exodus and the Exodus pattern, the Exodus kind of way. If you missed it, I encourage you to go back and watch it either on YouTube or on our website. Before we get into start reading here in Exodus, we need to back up to Genesis. As I mentioned before, you know, we see the Torah, the Pentateuch, as Moses writing these first 5 books of the Bible. They're one continuous story. But let's look at Genesis 13. 14 through 17. So someone go to Genesis 13 and someone else go to Genesis 15 for me. Genesis 13 and Genesis 15. Alright, so whoever has Genesis 13, can you read for me verses 14 through 17?
And the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see I give to you and your descendants forever. And I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if a man could number the dust of the earth, then your descendants also could be numbered. Arise, walk in the land through its length and its width, for I give it to you.
Good. All right, as you're dusting your house, can you count the dust?
Nope.
That's a lot of people. If that, obviously that's promise God is making to Abraham. Now go to Genesis 15. Who has that? Genesis 15, 13 through 15. Who's got that?
Michael got it.
Michael. 13 through 15.
Yeah.
And the Lord said to Abraham, you can be sure that your descendants will be strangers in a foreign land, where they will be oppressed as slaves for 400 years. But I will punish the nation that enslaves them, and in the end they will come away with great wealth. As for you, you will die in peace and be buried at a ripe old age.
All right. So, what's the good news and what's the bad news in this promise?
Good news, you'd be wealthy.
All right, yeah.
Bad news, you're going to be enslaved.
Yeah, for how long?
400 years.
400 years! Good grief. Like, why? My God, would you do that? So, just, if you were living during that time, and you got this promise of like, hey, here's this land, I'm going to make you be like the father of this nation, and but you got to wait 400 years until it's going to come true. What would you do? What kind of questions would you have for God?
What's my life expectancy?
It was longer then, right?
Hopefully it's not 400 years.
How do I prevent it?
How do I prevent it? Good. I honestly, I think that's like one of our first kind of thoughts, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you're telling me you're going to give me blank, and you're telling me I'm going to have to wait for it? No.
I want it now.
I want it now. Exactly. What are the kind of questions? Oh yeah, keep her off that. Thank you. During the 400 years, would you be thinking things like, where's God? Does he see me?
Yeah, is it true?
Is it true? Yeah. Does he not care?
What year are
What year are we in? Yeah.
It's year one.
Right? 399 more to go. Yeah. Now, how do we take this and kind of apply it to our own lives? I mean, do you get this kind of sense in your own lives sometimes where you feel like God is giving you a vision for something? or is promising you something, or giving you some sort of purpose or a direction, and yet you're not there yet.
Never.
Well, it makes me think of Revelations, like, when is that gonna happen?
Okay, when's Jesus coming?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
Absolutely. Yep. We don't know. It's not 400 years. There wasn't a time frame put on it, is there?
Yeah. Well, my mind goes to, I know as I get older, God willing, that I'm going to experience health issues.
Mm-hmm.
Like 100% of people do at some point. And the biggest concern and fear that I have is leaving my family behind, and the pain that they'll have to go through if I kick off early.
Right.
And so my mind goes to how do I prevent that? How do I ensure that I live a long, healthy life, so I can, God willing, see some grandbabies and
Right.
maybe even some great grandbabies.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Good. What's it like waiting for a new job? Waiting for employers to call you back when you've been applying 10,000 places? Or graduation? Feel like I'm in school forever. When's it gonna end?
6 months left.
God willing.
How about
have to be
for
your
your kids to return to the Lord? You know,
Ah,
you
perfect.
Raise them, and you're waiting for
You-
them to.
Yeah, yeah. For your kids to either come to Jesus, come to know Jesus, have a personal relationship with Him, or return to Him. Yeah, absolutely. We understand that it's hard, like, to wait on the Lord, isn't it? He gives you this vision or this desire, and we've got to wait for it. And so I want us to kind of sit in that as we kind of go through this, so we can kind of identify with, the people of Israel in the bondage that they, and the oppression that they're experiencing, but yet, have they forgotten about the promise? Are they still relying on it? How are they feeling? And I think we can identify with some of that. And we see this time of waiting, these 400 years, that God is obviously setting the stage for something magnificent and spectacular, right? It's a spectacular kind of deliverance. Could He be doing something like that for us in our waiting? As I was kind of thinking about that, I was thinking about, it's been a long time since I've gone to a play or to a musical, or even, nonetheless, even been in one. I remember, whether you've actually been in part of the cast, or just attending and being a spectator, and enjoying the musical or the play. That time of intermission, like did you know that that's purposeful? What do you think the purpose is?
Resetting the stage.
Yeah, so if you've ever done set design, there are some changes, small changes that can be made, in the sets, in like a single act. However, there is obviously in the storyline this kind of climax that's developing, and the intermission allows for the time for the set to change. So dramatic change, because now we're going to see like the resolution of this conflict that's all been developing, right? And so without that intermission, we wouldn't be able to have that time where this whole set needs to get changed. So so it's for set change, it's for the audience to get a break. You might be falling asleep, not just because it's boring, but just because you've been there like an hour and a half already, and you still got another hour and a half left. So it's just kind of stretch your legs and
I
that sort of
remember-
thing.
So sorry, just jump in. I remember like when I did pantomimes, sometimes in a mission I was always the bad guy,
Mm-hmm.
and so you would change from the guy that was the bad guy but wasn't like in his evil outfit, costume, makeup yet, and you had 15-20 minutes to kind of get all of that together. And so I think sometimes like there's a change in us that's got to take place as well.
Yeah, it's a perfect example. Yeah, absolutely. Why haven't we seen this, by the way?
I'll get some pictures.
There's some newspapers out there.
Nice.
There's all the paper things.
So I think we've got the kind of definition and purpose of like intermission, which is basically kind of what we've talked about. Is like strategic. It's purposeful, and so there's this God setting this stage for the spectacular kind of resolution and finale. I'll also just want kind of before we leave this kind of illustration, I want to just kind of mention that when we're in a time of life that's maybe intermission or kind of time of waiting, I wonder if sometimes we might compare our intermissions, the length of time, how difficult it was, whatever, like to others. And it's like, well, we're going through the same thing. Like, why is mine lasting longer? Why is my waiting kind of harder? I think we have to be real careful about comparing that because your story is different than this other person's. Completely different. And maybe the setup is longer because there's going to be a bigger finale. Maybe. So as we read through Exodus 1, we're starting to see this, or reminded of like God's faithfulness and to fulfill His promises. So we've already read the Genesis 15 passage, but someone read Genesis 1:28. Super familiar passage, Genesis 1:28.
God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground."
Okay, good. How do you determine if a promise is worth trusting?
On who God is.
Okay, on His character. Yeah. And so how do we practice faithfulness to God while you wait to see His promise to us, like the return of Christ, fulfilled? How do we practice faithfulness to God while we wait to see His promise fulfilled? Especially Christ's return.
Remember what He has done, the promises He has fulfilled.
Okay, which have been what?
I mean, chiefly just dying on the cross for us, right?
Doing what? Because a lot of His promises are covenants, right? And so we have a responsibility in that covenant as well that He's asked us to do, like being a light to the world, being people of character, reflecting Him in the situations we go into. Most of the Bible is, hey, here's how to love others, here's how to be a light to others, here's what the good news is. And so I think we show our faithfulness and expectation of Him fulfilling His part of that by fulfilling our part of that.
Mm-hmm. Good. Awesome.
By remembering what He's done
By remembering
in the
that.
past,
Sure.
or by reading His Word and seeing what He's done with others
Mm-hmm.
in the Word,
Good.
other people.
What other promises other than Christ's return, and salvation and going to the cross for us, and What other promises of God do you rely on?
One of my favorite songs from based on the Bible is "Steadfast love of the Lord never ceases; His mercies are new every morning. He's faithful every day." And I like that bit. I think it's Timothy, and it says, I can't remember the whole thing. It's like, if we are something, He'll be something. But it says, if we are faithless, He will be faithful, for He cannot discern Himself.
Right.
And it's just that whole concept of He doesn't know how not to be faithful. And that's I guess every day that's a promise, right? Because He's the same yesterday, same today, same forever. And so if He showed up yesterday, He'll show up today. And if He heard me yesterday, He'll hear me today. And if I could speak to Him yesterday, I can speak to Him today.
Good. What others?
Jeremiah 29:11.
Okay.
There's a plan.
He has a plan for us. Good. Not just any plan, but a good plan.
Yeah.
So he works good things out of bad things, right? That's not a promise. He's always with us. He'll never leave us.
It's the same yesterday.
He's the same.
Forever.
Mm-hmm.
Out through and in.
Mm-hmm. He sees us, he cares for us, he cares for the sparrows and the grass of the fields. How much more does he care for you and I? Watches over us. He never sleeps or slumbers. Shall we keep on going?
I really like the, not necessarily direct promise, the promise is that we will be changed into His likeness.
Yes.
And then you got the fruit of the Spirit, right?
Yes.
And so I just like thinking, okay, one day I'll be fully those things.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll be like, hey, patient today and patient tomorrow. Kind today
Yeah.
and unkind tomorrow.
Yeah.
I will be those things.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. Good. Awesome. Good. All right. So let's get into Exodus now. So someone want to read the first 7 verses? If the names scare you, it's okay. You can butcher them. Doesn't matter.
If people don't mind me saying it again. Now these are the names of the children of Israel who came to Egypt. Each man and his household came with Jacob. Reuben, Simeon, Levi and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun and Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad and Asher. All those who were descendants of Jacob were 70 persons, for Joseph was in Egypt already. And Joseph died, all his brothers and all that generation. But the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, multiplied and grew exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them.
Okay. So other translations would say, fruitful, increase, multiply. What do you think? What do you think Moses is trying to say here or highlight to us?
God fulfilled His promise from Moses.
Yeah, yes. Now let's go back to Genesis 1:28. So, be fruitful, multiply, fill the land, subdue it, rule over the fish and sea, birds of heaven, over every living creature. Exodus 1, verse 7. But the children of Israel were fruitful, and they swarmed. That's a better translation for the Hebrew there. Swarmed is very similar to the word that they used, and the fish became so much they swarmed the sea. They're fruitful, they swarmed, they increased, they became very, very numerous. The land was filled with them. See, just as this literary kind of technique of just repeating these words and coming up with synonyms to depict to us like how numerous they became, and how now maybe why Pharaoh's starting to get a little nervous. Because there's so many of them. Also note, I think this is super interesting to note, that right now the Israelites are doing everything that they're commanded to do in Genesis 1:28, except for they aren't subduing, they're being subdued. Isn't that kind of interesting?
Every living creature.
Yeah, and so God never. So there's a message here. I think that if we dig for it a little bit, is that God never intended for another human to subdue another human. God never intended for one man to oppress or exploit, subjugate, subdue someone else. Or to subdue the earth and the creatures in it, not each other. So if we fast forward just so Exodus 12:37 says, at this point we have like 600,000 Israelites. This is just counting just men alone. This is not women and children. Just men alone, 600,000. So we know that there's this great oppression that's happening, which we haven't even read yet, but we know the story, so we know it's coming, or it has been happening because they're in slavery. But it seems like the people, these Hebrew people, are flourishing in spite of oppression. So what could that mean for us? If we're under oppression, if we're going through a difficulty, do you think we could still prosper?
Yes.
Do you think we can still flourish?
Maybe in different ways than we expected, or
Okay. Yeah.
because God works in different ways than
Right.
we do.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think we have a habit of looking at what we don't have, or
Yes.
Yeah.
circumstances we wish we were in.
Right. Right.
Um,
Exactly.
But if we have gratitude for what we do have and what we are in, it can change the perspective of what we're actually doing.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I want to encourage you, like as you're going through a difficulty, whether it's right now or in the near future, think about, rather than complaining, which is so easy to do, look for opportunities or see it as an opportunity for you to flourish. Because it can happen. I think this is a great kind of reminder. All right, now someone read verses 8 through 14.
Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply, and if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. Therefore they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with heavy burdens. They built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves, and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick, and in all kinds of work in the field. In all their work they ruthlessly made them work as slaves.
Good. All right. So, so this new king, this new Pharaoh, he had heard about Joseph, but he didn't obviously know Joseph. But he knew about his strategy, his plan, because what Pharaoh did was first of all, so obviously Joseph had this gift of administration, leadership, and he helped Egypt. He helped that Pharaoh develop a strategy, develop a plan to deal with the 7 years of famine that was coming. So 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. And so Joseph's plan was basically, okay, so everybody is going to plant as much as they can so that we can have as much food as we can, so we can store it up and have enough to get us through like the 7 years of famine. So everyone was involved, working very hard to accomplish this this thing that was coming. So it was everybody was working super hard for the common good, right? To help everybody out. And so this new Pharaoh comes in and says, so they're already used to working really, really hard. And plus, I've got some slaves now. So what we're going to do is I'm going to work everybody hard. So it wasn't just Israelites that were enslaved. Pharaoh kept his own people enslaved as well. They too were to continue to work hard, but not for common good anymore, for the good of Pharaoh this time. See the shift? Now we've taken if you're a leader, this is an important concept, is you can take any sort of good strategy and turn it into something that actually exploits, turn it into something that's bad. So we have to watch, for that, right? Be aware of that. In verse 10, it's important to note and super interesting that the text you see, Pharaoh says, "Come, let us." Come, let us. And if you back up to like Genesis 11 at the Tower of Babel thing, what do the people say? They say, "Come, let us build a city for ourselves and a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered." So there's this act of kind of arrogance and pride with this, "Come, let us." And then if you know the Tower of Babel story, God's response is, "Come, let us." I'm going to meet this resistance or this pride and arrogance with resistance. This is, "Come, let us" is like saying like, this is my way of doing this. I want it my way. What's that Frank Sinatra song? I did it my way. I want it my way. And God's going to say, "Nope, we're going to do it my way, actually." And so we already can tell, we link this like to that Tower of Babel story. We can kind of already see, if we didn't know the story, what's going to happen. So verse 11, I think it's also interesting to kind of note that when you look at the Hebrew, building in these kind of storehouses, what two cities are they building?
Pithom and Ramses.
Exactly. All right, as I explained last week, these are places for storing up goods and storing up things, whatever was needed. I'm not sure what that was, but whatever was needed for continuing to worship this Pharaoh after he died. All right, they saw themselves as divine and were treated as divine, and so they were worshipped. And so the Hebrew word for these buildings, these like Amazon warehouses, were mishkanot. And so when we fast forward and look at in Exodus 25 through 40 is all about the tabernacle. All these chapters are all about the tabernacle. Well, the word for tabernacle in Hebrew is mishkan. See the similarity? Mishkanot, mishkan. And so we need to tie. It's kind of interesting how we tie those. Like, in Hebrew, you would see this like super clearly that here's he's building for Pharaoh's purposes, but yet the Israelites are building this building for God's purposes. Just the contrast here, it just goes back and forth. "Come, let us," and the Mishkanot and the Mishkan. Those that are proud and arrogant think they've got it all figured out, want it my way, and God says, "No, I'm going to have it my way. I'm going to be worshipped. You're not going to be worshipped." We can see this super clear, especially in the Hebrew. All right, so Exodus 1:8 through 14, we just did that. Okay, so obviously dreadful kind of picture here, what's going on. Israel desperately needs deliverance. They can't save themselves. How is this similar to our own need for deliverance of whatever we're in? do you end up in some scenarios where you need some deliverance? Huh?
Ever? Do we ever?
Oh, do we ever?
No, like are you saying, have we ever been in scenarios where
Is there anything you need deliverance from?
like
Anybody?
right now?
Sure. Anybody need want to share? Or in the recent, or in the past?
Sin.
Okay. That's the greatest Exodus, right?
Yeah.
Which I think that's super important, that we see like the gospel story like in this is the Exodus way, right? Where like this, if we see the Red Sea as sin, as this thing that separates us from the promised land of a relationship with Jesus, a promised land of heaven, and but yet there's the separation of this kind of this Red Sea between us and that. And Jesus comes and parts the Red Sea for us to be able to walk through right into like the promised land. Right? I mean, that the gospel story is an Exodus story. All right, so just like we had a pile up of words, like to describe like the Israelites being fruitful and multiplying, and they're swarming, and there's a pile up of words here in this section that talk about just how bad the work was. Do you see that? It's just it's kind of like this monotonous kind of synonyms that are just one after another, and just another literary kind of style or technique to be able to kind of communicate how, hey, this is bad stuff, this is pretty oppressive. But this does reveal to us that really no person or institution can oppose God's plan and win. How do you need this reminder today?
All the time.
What else might this say about God?
You watch news at all, might be easily discouraged by what we see there.
Yeah. That's why I don't watch it.
AI. Right, you have,
AI?
who in here gets worried about AI?
Taking over.
Skynet,
Yeah.
Cyberdyne Systems, whatever.
Yeah.
Judgment Day.
Right. So
Did you see how that one, like they were trying to shut it down, just do tests about shutting it down, and then it not only like sent out like hidden messages, but also like tried to blackmail like the engineer.
oh, mercy.
You know.
They did that in an episode of Batman.
But anyway, that's not the point. What are you saying?
Oh yeah, it's easily to get discouraged and kind of concerned about it's quote unquote a greater power that you don't understand. Right? But when those thoughts come on, I immediately remember God is sovereign, even over the abomination we may have built. The thing that was supposed to help us and bring us glory as a society, and bring all nations together, our Tower of Babel, if you will.
Yeah.
God is over it all and doesn't care about what we build. He's more powerful than that. And we, as the lowly person with little understanding, we can fret about it, which doesn't add a day to our lives. Or we can continue to submit to God and His will and put our faith and trust in Him. When the disciples in the boat were terrified of the winds and the storms, and Jesus was napping.
Yeah.
Have you not figured it out yet? It's all
I
good.
love it.
So
Yep.
keep our eyes fixed on Him.
Absolutely. Awesome. All right, someone finish out the chapter 1. So starting in verse 15. all the way through 22. Anyone?
Then Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, gave this order to the Hebrew midwives, Sifra and Puah. When you help the Hebrew women as they give birth, watch as they deliver. If the baby is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let her live. But because the midwives feared God, they refused to obey the king's orders. They allowed the boys to live too. So the king of Egypt called for the midwives. Why have you done this? He demanded. Why have you allowed the boys to live? The Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. The midwives replied, They are more vigorous and have their babies so quickly that we cannot get there in time. So God was good to the midwives, and the Israelites continued to multiply, growing more and more powerful. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people. Throw every newborn Hebrew boy into the Nile River, but you may let the girls live.
Yeah. Did any of your translations say delivery bricks instead of delivery stool?
Mine says stool.
Huh?
Mine says stool.
Stool. Anyone? No? That's kind of is. Huh? Yours says
Mine
bricks?
said that too.
Oh, stool?
Yeah, delivery stool.
Yeah.
That's a birth stool.
Birth stool. There was kind of a Egyptian kind of birthing process, I guess, where you had these bricks that you would decorate, and then there's two of them, so they would kind of not straddle, but they would squat on these bricks while and then there was some sort of kind of special cloth that was kind of draped over under the mother and draped over the bricks. And so then there was also some significance of I need to do more research on this, but there's some sort of significance to placing the baby on these. You push the bricks together and you place the baby like on these bricks. So that's kind of what they're referring to, kind of this practice here, which generally doesn't add anything to what we're learning, but it's just kind of interesting more than anything else. So obviously Pharaoh moves from oppressive slavery to more oppressive slavery, and now to government-sponsored murder, right? However, you can see we witness, in spite of that, the faithfulness of the two Hebrew midwives and how they make excuses for why they couldn't or didn't kill these babies. Oh, they're just shooting them out left and right. They're just having them before I can even get there. So I think what it has us, in spite of they could have certainly feared the Pharaoh, right? And so I think this is a good question for us. In spite of fear, how can we boldly be faithful? This could be fearing somebody, it could be fearing an institution, it could be fearing someone's reaction to sharing the gospel, for example. How do we step out of our comfort zone and deal with that fear?
Step out of your comfort zone.
How do you do that?
Just say yes.
Just say
Yeah.
yes, just do it.
Ask for help. Pray.
But
Well,
supernatural.
and that's that's another promise. It's God's going to send the Spirit like to give you power and strength and words, and we didn't even mention that promise a while ago, right? What were you gonna say?
Well, the how of it, like, how do you start overcoming that fear? You live in the Word. Like, you continuously seek after God. Isn't that, I mean, what He asks us to do? It's like, come to me. I will handle the rest. You just need to come to me. So, in going to Him through His Word and all of that, He provides the rest. Your fear, you notice your fear starts dwindling. It becomes easier to talk to strangers, or whatever is hindering you.
Yeah. It's good. It's so hard getting out of our comfort zone sometimes, though, isn't it? Sometimes we don't even realize we're in a comfort zone because we've gotten so comfortable. I think this is super cool and super ironic that Pharaoh is fearing, obviously, the sheer numbers of the Israelites. And so his strategy or plan is like, so I want to kill all the males, babies, so they don't develop an army to fight against me or take over. But isn't it interesting that we get deliverance from the females? That Pharaoh should have been worried about women, not about men. Isn't that kind of interesting? Girl power. Kind of super ironic. And it doesn't it kind of illustrate like how God works sometimes, like against our maybe natural inclinations, a way of kind of thinking things, like, hey, this makes sense. And God's like, well, maybe it makes sense to you, but I'm going to choose to do it a different way. Is that comforting?
It lets me worry less. Almost to my detriment.
It is kind of cool how, like it was Eve, right, that brought sin into the world. And so you see these specific points in time of women that God uses to bring salvation. And it's like Jesus and Peter, feed my sheep, take care of my sheep. Like, hey, okay, I'm bringing you redemption, I'm bringing you forgiveness, and this is not the end, right? Like, there's more to the story. So I think that's cool. Like, when you see a woman in the Bible and He's like, gonna use you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially during Bible times where you see very few like women, like you read genealogies, you're not going to see a whole lot of like women, even in like the first part of Exodus, and so, but just Jesus just elevates I think women a lot. I think it's pretty cool.
So were these midwives Egyptian women?
They're Hebrew women. I think I said that wrong last week. If I did, I apologize.
Yeah, I've read several different commentaries, and one of them was saying they may have been Egyptian, and another one was like they were Hebrew.
Okay.
I don't know the names well enough to know.
Yeah.
It said they were Hebrew, though. Like,
In the scripture it says Hebrew, but
Hebrew midwives, as in midwives to the Hebrews.
Yeah.
Well,
True.
sorry to interject. The way this reads right here in Amplified, when you act as midwives to the Hebrew women.
Which would explain, and I don't know if it is, so take it with a grain of salt, but so let's say you're Egyptian and you're trying to kill the Hebrew babies. It would make more sense if you were trying to convince the Egyptians to do that.
Right.
The Hebrews to do that.
Yeah.
But it also makes the boldness and the morality of those women all stronger, I think, if they were Egyptian.
Yeah.
a little
Absolutely.
more sense why their excuse works.
Right.
Just can't get there in time.
Right, exactly.
Also, if they had slaves that were Jewish and non-Jewish, then there would be non-Jewish midwives also.
Look at that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Brilliant.
And it's interesting, the other thing the commentary was saying was that if there were midwives, often they would become midwives because they could not have children themselves. But one of the things that happened afterwards is God dwelt well with them and gave them a household. And so he blessed them with children, it seems.
Amazing. God's awesome. Well, so just a couple last questions for us to think about is how often do we fear the wrong thing?
All the time, probably.
Probably all the time.
Isn't that, I mean, isn't that why it's one of the reasons why it's helpful, like, to have community and doing life like together, is talking about these things, and God can speak to you through someone else. And then lastly, like, I guess worry is kind of a lesser form of fear, but nonetheless, it's still fear. But what does our worry reveal about our belief of who God is? What does our worry reveal about our belief who God is?
My worries reflect that I'm not trusting that God is who he says he is, that he's not faithful.
Well, when I think about it, it lets me realize that there's a part of me that sees my plans for life as better. Right? And so I'm oftentimes checked on that in my heart. It's like your idea of good doesn't match with God's plan.
Right.
And so,
Hey God, if I were you, I would do this.
Right.
I thought about that.
how do we pray?
I've had lots of those conversations with them.
Like, yeah, we want your will to be done, but if we get a vote,
Right.
we
Yeah.
want this, that, and the other.
I think sometimes it is, and it's maybe semantics, but like, you can't, I think it's difficult to ever not, like, even if you were perfect, there'll be a measure of what if that comes up, and then it's like, what do you do with that, right? Like the choice you have. I think about Jesus, where it says, if it is possible to take this cup from me, then take it. But then his choice is, but not my will, but your will. And so I think sometimes you can beat yourself up for being afraid of something or being worried about something or concerned, but ultimately it's the choice you choose to do with those feelings and emotions that determines what you chose, right? Did you trust, did you have faith in God or didn't you? It's all about that choice.
Fantastic reminder, because in the scripture it says Jesus was worried to the point of sweating blood, right? That's a lot of worry. I've never worried so much that I've sweat blood. But it does highlight that you can be worried, but like you said, it's the choice you make and the submission to God's will. I think matters.
Yeah.
It's good.
Or maybe concern is a better word for it.
Yeah, I think that's why it's like, is worry when you're acting on that concern
Yeah.
rather than acting on the faith.
Maybe
But you can have that feeling, right?
Yes.
So what do you do with that?
Right.
Yeah.
healthy concern. Yeah.
We're concerned.
And I've said it before, but fear says, what if, but faith says, even if.
Yeah. Yeah, as Paul says, do not say you'll do this or that tomorrow, God willing, right? And is that God willing a statement of faith in God, or is that God willing kind of que sera, sera, you know?
Right, right. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, let's stop here and grab some lunch. If you don't mind hitting that stop button, someone.
Take courage.
Do it.